I want to just spend a little bit of time today sharing with you a little bit about what the SDS office does, how we support faculty, and then kind of go through the accommodation process that faculty or any instructors of record should be doing once you receive this letter of accommodation that shows up in your email box. And so we'll just kind of go through that process. I want to talk a little bit about some options that you have, sort of the process that the student goes through, and then mainly to answer any questions or concerns that you have, because this is one of the areas that can be one of our trickiest when it comes to doing things correctly and not getting ourselves in a bind. But it's also one that usually is very easily to handle if you just kind of understand the process. So we'll kind of go through that. Okay, here we go. The main thing that I want to just kind of review quickly is just basically the processes that the Student Disability Services uses and what we're here for as far as faculty goes. First, we do determine eligibility for the services and academic accommodations. So when a student's ready to apply for services, they do have to log on to our website, upload their documentation, and then apply for services. So we do review documentation to determine what kinds of accommodations the student is eligible to have. So faculty oftentimes will ask us, well, how is it determined what they get in terms of their accommodations? And the simplest answer is it all depends on their documentation. We do have federal guidelines that we have to comply with, and there's a set of pretty much what we call standardized accommodations that students are eligible to have that have been determined as reasonable and appropriate through various court rulings, OCR rulings. Office of Civil Rights is what I will be referring to when I say OCR. So there's just a lot of things that we have to look at based on the documentation that the student gives us. So that's how that eligibility is determined. So it's not a random thing, but it is based on what they submit to us. We do provide faculty training as well for any kind of ADA compliance issues. We do lots of new student TA training at the beginning of the year. And then we, of course, like to do these kind of presentations so that you can ask very specific questions. So we do provide academic counseling and disability counseling to all the students that qualify. And then probably one facet of our office that I think sometimes gets left out with our faculty is that we are there to resolve issues between faculty and students. And we want to be there as a resource to you as faculty to help you understanding why a student may be getting certain accommodations, but how those accommodations will work in your classroom and what they might look like. This is just a quick list of all the different accommodations that we, all the different disabilities that we work with. Probably the ones that we're seeing the most significant increase in right now are students with the psychological issues, anxiety, stress, and certainly during COVID that has increased significantly. And then students on the autism spectrum, we're seeing a really large increase in the number of students with that particular disability, and those accommodations can be challenging as well. So, and again, as Suzanne has noted, please feel free to jump in and ask questions along the way if you have any questions there. So, all right. That is just quickly a review of the kind of the basic things that our office does in terms of support services. So I'm just going to dive in. Let's see. Okay, yeah. I am going to get into how the logistics work of a 1.5 times in the class, and so we will get into the accommodation process right now, and then I'll talk about specifically some of the accommodations that you're probably going to see. And so then hopefully that will kind of address that question there too. First and foremost, all letters of accommodation are sent electronically. They go through the TTU email system. So if a student brings you a copy of something, or if you receive it in any other way other than through your TTU email, please do not accept it. We've had, especially in the last year or two, students taking printed out copies of LOAs that they've had for something else to faculty and saying that they need certain accommodations. So just make sure that the only one that you're following is the one that you will get in your TTU email. because it will come from the Student Disability Services Office. It will contain the student's name, the course number, and the section number that they're in. And if you aren't able to get one that a student has indicated they have sent, you can contact our office and we will resend it to you as well. So things to keep in mind is that the letter of accommodation, it's typically sent within the first week of class or the week prior to, and it's always sent to the instructor of record on each course. So if a course is taught by two different faculty members or two different instructors, just make sure that if you're the instructor of record that you've shared it with the other one, or if you have a lab that's taught by student TAs, that they also have access to this, because they are still responsible for making sure those accommodations happen in the lab as well. While we always do it the first week of class, it's important to remember that our students do, by law, have the right to submit an accommodation letter anytime during a regular semester. We always encourage them to do it at the beginning, but we also know that they do have the right to do that. That is to cover students who may have something come up during the course of a semester, such as an injury or something like that, something that may cause them to be able to now qualify for disability accommodations. So you might get it during the semester. Typically, you're going to get the vast majority of them the week prior, because we've already sent them out for this semester for the ones who have requested it. But they go in almost daily and request these. So just be on the alert that you could get it any time between now and mid-semester. We do let them request accommodations up until 1 week left in the regular semester, because as in university policy allows, instructors of record have 1 week from the date that they receive the accommodation letter to get everything in place. So that's why after the last, up to the last week of class, they cannot request accommodations any longer. So it's important to remember that the accommodations do apply to all face-to-face, hybrid, and online courses. I think a couple of questions I got at the new faculty orientation was a couple of questions, one from a new faculty who didn't understand that the accommodations would apply to her online course. She said, I'm in the online course, so I don't really have to use this, do I? So granted, a lot of the stuff that we use for accommodations in the regular classroom are kind of built in to an online course, but the accommodation letter still will apply to online courses, especially when it comes to the testing component, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, because I know that was the one question that we, it says, I'm not technically in the system yet, so I'm not listed as the instructor of record. Well, I still see these letters of accommodation. You will not until you're able to get into the system. Now, as soon as you meet with the student, you can tell the student if there's a student that talks to you about it in the classroom, because a lot of them will. They will let us know who the instructor of record is on that course when they go to the first day of class. Sometimes they will get that information before we do, because our information is pulled directly from the banner system. So you may not get it at the very beginning, but you will very shortly. So it shouldn't be an issue that you have to worry about with that. All right. Again, it's important to remember that if you're an instructor of record and you have a lab taught by someone else, make sure that they also get a copy of it. You can forward the LOA to the lab instructor if you need to, but LOAs can only be sent to TTU email addresses. So if you're going to forward it, make sure that you're forwarding it only to a TTU email. That is for security reasons. That's what protects our confidentiality. So it can only go to those. We have had requests from instructors previously to send it to their Gmail or somewhere else, but we cannot do that. We're only permitted to send them to TTU emails. Okay, once you get that letter, the student, and again, this is important to remember, it's on the student. The student must meet with you individually for the accommodation to become effective. They must initiate this. Now, the interaction or the meeting can be done virtually, can be done by phone, or it can be done by email. That is up to you. The instructor has the choice of which way they'd like to meet with the student, whichever is easiest and will work with you. And if it's a face-to-face meeting, it should be done during your office hours. So once you've met with the student, regardless of the way you've done it, whether it's by email or by virtual Zoom meeting or phone, either way, you can just reply to that email that was sent to you, the LOA, if you want record of that. So just reply to the letter of accommodation email and just say you met with the student on such and such date, and that will be entered into the system as a way to verify that you have actually met with them. So if there's ever a question down the road about whether you met with them or not, we have that documented for you. And then the last thing on this slide, it's important to remember is that all accommodations on the LOA should be provided. So there's not anything on there that the student has not requested specifically for your class, because they do have the ability now with our new system to be able to basically tailor the letter of accommodation to each specific class and in the way that they need it. When they meet with you, if they want an accommodation that's not on the list for your LOA, ask them to send you an updated LOA with the requested accommodation. Sometimes it's just because they haven't thought about it. Sometimes it's because they may want an accommodation that they're not eligible to have. So if it's not on the LOA, just ask them to send you a new one, an updated one with that on it. If they're eligible to do that, they can do that very quickly. If they're not eligible for it, it's not going to happen. That's when you might want to call the SDS office, and you can certainly do that at any point and talk to that student's academic counselor, and they can let you know whether or not they are actually eligible to have an accommodation they're requesting that's not on their LOA. Likewise, this is the other thing that's kind of important. Let's see, I'm sorry, does this mean the instructor may not initiate this meeting? Oh, no, and thank you for bringing it up. That's a great point, and I kind of skipped right by that. But you absolutely, if you get a letter from a student, an LOA that comes through your email, and the student hasn't reached out to you, it is perfectly acceptable to send a reminder to them and say, hey, I got your letter of accommodation, but we haven't met about this yet. You know, you might want to do this. You may want to send me a time or a date or set up something. Yes, it's very acceptable to reach out to them. We just want faculty to understand and instructors to understand that you're not required to provide anything until you have met with that student to discuss how it's going to be handled in your classroom, because they're going to be a little bit different in each classroom. So likewise, if there's an accommodation on that LOA that they say they do not want, you need to ask them to send you a revised letter of accommodation, taking that one off. This is a protection for you as an instructor, because we have had, unfortunately, in the past, a student who met with an instructor, they had note-taking, for example, on their letter of accommodation, and but told the instructor, I don't really need notes, so don't worry about that one. I just need my extra time on my test. But then for the semester, they kind of stumbled. And then they went back and said, well, I was never receiving my notes. And I know I asked about notes. And if it's on that letter of accommodation, even though they agreed that they didn't need it, you could still be held liable for that. So if there's an accommodation on their letter that they don't want, just ask them to send you an updated one without that accommodation on it, because they can certainly do that. And that all happens in the same day. So it's not a lengthy process at all. So any questions about that? We'll take a little pause right here. I realize I'm going through a lot of this really quickly, but okay. And we'll get to the testing part here in just a minute.
So Larry,
yeah, go ahead.
I do have a question.
Sure.
So I had a student come to my office this morning to discuss the LOA, and the student chose not to have some of the accommodations.
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to get the revised LOA, or is it enough to email and say, you know, as we discussed at this time, you will not be using these accommodations, but should this change, you're going to let me know as we agreed, you know, blah, blah, blah. Is that enough documentation?
It would be, as long as you copy the student, and I would, CC the SDS email as well.
Okay,
I would do that. You can do it either way, but again, it's documentation that you want to do. Because they really shouldn't be sending you an accommodation letter that has something on it that they don't want, because
yeah, it's because of the class. The class doesn't have an in-class assignment that she would need extra time for, so.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, but either way would work, but just as long as you've documented somewhere for yourself, just to keep that from coming back later and being something that they would request.
Perfect.
Yes, thank you, Carrie, for putting our email up there. You would also want to copy that, because then it will be forwarded to the student's academic counselor and they will put it in their file. So we have that. Remember, I know we talked about just a little bit ago about that they can request it at any point during the semester, but it's important to remember that the LOA is not retroactive and it only becomes effective after the individual meeting with the instructor. That's why we tell them to get it set up as early as they can, so that if they qualify for note-taking assistance or extra time on their exams, any of that, it'll be done from the beginning. But if they don't send it to you until midterm, the accommodations are only effective midterm going forward. This is important to remember because we have had students in the past, in the not so distant past as well, but would come up send it at midterm, and then a week after that want to know why they didn't get notes from the first half of the class, or shouldn't they be able to get notes from the first half of the class? Absolutely not. These are not retroactive. They're only active from the point the student discloses to you they need them and moving forward. So, and again, just remember to look over it carefully and contact us if you have any questions about this. We have a great staff, people that are willing to talk with you about these and how they're implemented. And if you're having issue with the student, we will, help you with that. So what is note-taking assistance? All right, we'll get to that here in just a second. If I can get my PowerPoint to work here. Okay, we will talk about note-taking assistance. Attendance is a big one, and this is why that's next up on the slide, because this is one that comes up every semester. But answer the one about note-taking, and I'll go ahead and discuss the test-taking one as well. Note-taking assistance is something that is meant, and it actually, every disability area we work with qualifies for this. Supplemental note-taking assistance is something you will see in the letter of accommodation, and that just means that the student is eligible to get some type of help with their note-taking process. This can be done in a lot of different ways. Some instructors choose to recruit a volunteer note taker from the course. I think those options are on your LOA, but they can ask for a volunteer note taker. We have a lot of students in our service organizations that actually look for classes where they're asking for a note-taking volunteer, because they can count those as service hours, which is a really important thing too for them. But it's not intended to replace their note-taking. It's simply meant to supplement them helping with their notes. A good example for this would be, say we have a student who has some kind of a physical limitation and can't write as quickly as other students might. So they can try to get some notes down, but they may not be able to get everything. And so the supplemental notes are meant to kind of supplement what they're getting, and to kind of help. So if they miss something, or if they're getting behind, they can kind of stop and then try to catch up a little bit. But they know that they can use those supplemental notes to kind of help them if there's stuff that they've missed. Same thing, we have some students with, for example, ADHD. When they're in a class and they're taking notes and there's a lot of stuff going on in the classroom, somebody's moving, something happens and they get distracted. They kind of get lost. The idea is that if they're getting a set of kind of backup notes or some other ways to supplement this, they're not going to miss everything. They're going to have a way to kind of catch up with some of that information. The ways that you can do that, you can request a supplemental note taker if you would like. We provide the note-taking pads for those students that want to do that. It's just, they're carbonless pads where they're taking their own notes, but it's also making a copy. And at the end of class, they just tear off the extra copy and they will give that to you as the instructor. Then you as the instructor can make sure it gets to the student that needs it. You'll want to set that up probably at a different time just to protect their confidentiality. So most instructors just take those back to their classroom or to their office and leave it there for the student to pick up, whenever they can or whenever they're able to. Some students don't mind at all, just having you hand it to them right there in the classroom. And if they're agreeable to that, then that's fine. One of the other ways that you can do note taking is if you use PowerPoints on a regular basis, you can provide those to the students ahead of time so that they can print those out and have them in front of them. Instead of trying to get every bit of the information down, they fill in the blanks. They kind of write in between the notes there for you. So it's just a way for them to make sure they're getting as much information as possible from their notes. That is one. Some students, if you don't want to have a handwritten note takers, we do also allow you to have students who take notes on their computer. And then at the end of class, they can email you a copy of their notes, and then you can just forward those on to the students. So there's a variety of ways to do it. It is up to you as the instructor to determine the way you want to do it. The student may tell you what their preference is, but it is your choice as to which one of those you want. And if you're just not sure how to do that, please contact the SGS office and we will help you with that, because there are some other options, but that is what the note-taking assistance means. It just means it's to help supplement, but by no means does a student come in there and not be making any attempt to take notes. That's not what it's meant to do. It's not meant to do it for them, to replace it. It's just meant to supplement. So if we record the meeting, then it has to be closed caption, correct? If you record the class, if it's going to be rebroadcast, yes, it must be captioned. The e-learning office has an office that will do that for you. So we are able to do that. Terry Knight over in the e-learning and worldwide partnerships and academic partnerships, they will help you with that. So we are able to do that. But yes, if you're going to record a class and it's going to be reused, it absolutely has to be rebroadcast. It's going to be made accessible, available to the students any other time. It has to be captioned, yes. Great question. Now, on the exams, that was the other one that came up. See, yes, YouTube does have the caption features, but it's also not accurate enough to be considered as acceptable for closed captioning. We do use the transcripts from those. Yes, contact name is Terry Knight in the e-learning office, yes. Yeah, I've been asked by that quite a few times. And while the YouTube captioning, even the Zoom captioning is fairly accurate, it's not a substitute for the actual captioning that must be done, closed captioning that must be done for the information. Because again, it's about 80–85% accurate, but that means the student's only required to be responsible for 80–85% of your information. So that's kind of the way we look at it. If they're responsible for 100% of the information in the class, then we have to provide that in a 100% accurate way. So that's kind of the idea behind that. That's what the captionings help, but we do need to make sure they're fully accurate. On the testing, because I think someone asked about that, I want to talk about that while we're talking about specific accommodations. Students will either get time and a half, or double time on their accommodation letter. There should never be a case where they get any more. The thing to keep in mind is this is only applicable to timed exams, timed paper pencil exams, or timed exams on the computer through Blackboard or whatever, whether the student has to sit down, begin the exam, and complete it in a single setting. This does not apply to take-home exams. It did not apply to exams that are open on Monday and closed on Friday. It is applicable to timed exams. So that's the first thing to remember. If you are not able to provide the extra time for the student in your classroom, most instructors take advantage of the testing center on campus, the academic testing center on campus. Some students test in our office as well, but most of them use the academic testing center. And the way that works is the student will bring you a testing contract. We call it the pink forms, but they will bring it to you. It explains how you want to get the exam over to the academic testing center and what kinds of things they can use, calculators, word banks, whatever, or if they can't use anything. But then it also explains how you want the test returned to you. So that on the date and time of the regularly scheduled exams, instead of going to your classroom, the student will go to the academic testing center. You take the exam using the extra time, and then they will get that exam back to you. Same thing applies for the double time. So if it is in an evening exam, that will be administered in the SDS office. But any exams during the regular academic day will go through the academic testing center. If it's an evening exam, we will set that up. But you only need to worry about filling out that pink form that the student brings to you to fill out, because the key to that, regardless of where it will be administered on our side, is just making sure that you have it set up so that we know exactly how you want the exam administered and how you want it returned to you. So does that answer the question that someone had about the testing piece? Can you open an exam for longer just for one student in Blackboard? That's a technical question. I'll have to ask Blackboard. I think I'm almost positive you can. Some said, well, would I just have to give all students the 6 hours? No, you don't have to. You can. The way that some instructors handle it is if it's a 2-hour exam and somebody has the time and a half, they will tell them the exam is open for 2 hours, but I'm going to leave it open for 3 hours. So you can use the extra time if you want. But you really kind of have to look at that on an individual basis. Some classes, it doesn't make any difference whether the entire class has all the extra time or not. Some it will. But that's entirely up to you as an instructor. And you'll have to, Terry and I can also help you with that over in e-learning about whether you can open it for just one student in Blackboard or not. I'm not sure. We proctor a lot of exams for students over here that even using Blackboard. So we can do that, but you can check with them and say, I'm not sure if they can do it or not. So that I'm not a very good resource for that, but we can check on that. So was there other questions about the exam itself? Okay, great. The next one just is a big one because it has really come up, especially since we've been dealing with COVID, and that's on attendance. First and foremost, it's important to understand that there is no accommodation that exists that allows for a student to miss a class simply because they have a disability. That is not an accommodation. It's important to remember that there may be cases of a flare-up of a disability during the semester, and absences for those can be considered on a case-by-case basis. But if that happens, the student should be in contact with you. They will be in contact with their counselor here in the SDS office, and we'll all be kind of collaborating about that. But that should be on a rare basis. But we have had students in the past who have come up on the first day of class and explained to an instructor that they have a disability, and so they're probably going to miss some class. And it's just important that you understand that that is not an accommodation because class attendance is considered an essential part of the course. So, but there may be some extenuating circumstances. So if there's students that have medical emergencies, then it causes them to miss class for more than a week, whether it's tied to their disability or not, they will need to contact the instructor and then the associate academic deans in that department to see if they're able to make up that work, but the dean of students office will also assist with this process. So if they're going to be out for more than a week, ask them to contact the dean of students office, and then they will work with us as well if it's a student with a disability. But that's for medical emergencies, students that are in wrecks, automobiles, accidents, something like that, that it's going to cause them to be out of class for a while. COVID this semester is going to be a little bit of a different animal. So if they're going to be out for COVID, for quarantining and things, I believe you already got instructions on how to handle that for a COVID-based issue. But COVID it does not fall under the disability category. Now, it has been determined that long haul COVID patients who have long haul effects and they're still dealing with it will fall under those for a chronic illness, and they would qualify for accommodations, but missing class is not going to be one of the accommodations. So questions about that? Okay, just a couple of notes. Confidentiality. It's very important to remember information regarding the student's disability cannot be shared with other faculty, staff, or parents without the student's written permission. Instructors should always be careful not to share information about a student's disability with other students, faculty or members. What we're trying to make sure here is that faculty are careful, instructors are careful not to share information about a student with other folks in their department. We have had that happen before, and that's unfortunate. Unless you're talking about a way to accommodate a student, one that may be difficult, you want to be very careful about sharing any of a student's information with anyone else in your department. It has happened before, and we almost got sued over it, but we fortunately were able to settle it. But where a faculty member was very, very frustrated with a student, and rightfully so, we understand they can be a challenge sometimes, but was going off about a student taking advantage of things to other instructors in the area. And unfortunately, that student's roommate was also in earshot of the conversation and reported that back to them. And so, needless to say, it was not a good situation. We almost got in trouble over that. So it's just important to remember, be very careful about who you share information about a student with, unless there's a need to know basis. Okay, I have a student with an accommodation letter asking for a front row seat. Can I reserve a seat for that student that does not go against our confidentiality? Obviously, yes. There is going to be some cases where if a student wants a specific type of accommodation, and there's nothing you can do about that, but that means that they're okay with disclosing that kind of information. It's okay that they're identified that way. Certainly, if a student says, I want a reserved seat, you're going to reserve that seat. And the people are going to know it's reserved for that student. And that's okay. You just explain that to the student when they say, I need a front row seat. You will let them know, I'm glad to do that, but just be aware the students are going to be aware of that too. And that shouldn't bother them. Obviously, that's the same thing with our students with sign language interpreters in the classroom. Obviously, they know what they're there for and who they're there for. So there's just going to be some instances that's just the case. And there's not really anything you can do about that. Other than just make the student aware of it. So great question. Yes. There is a mandatory syllabus statement. I'm sure you've all seen this already in your faculty training, but this is a statement again that just has to be in there, just letting them know that they need to contact our office, and that you're not allowed to provide any kind of accommodation that's not on their LOA. I want to also say this really quick about the syllabus requirements, but also when it comes to accommodations that a student might ask for. I know we've been really diligent about saying, please don't provide things that are not on their LOA. It's also important to remember that if a student asks for something, if it's something that you would do for any student in your classroom that requests something as far as extra help, absolutely you can do that. I don't want to come across as a negative, person here and just say, please don't do anything they're asking for. Just remember that if they're asking for something in general, if they come up and say, well, I was sick, because of, I have respiratory issues, but I was sick, and could I make up the work? If it's something for a single illness, something like that you would do for any student, absolutely. Or if they come up and say, could I get a study guide of some kind? If it's something that you would be doing for anybody, absolutely. But just, if it's something you do for any student, then it's certainly permissible for that as well. On your syllabus, please remember that all test dates and assignment due dates need to be on that. Because assignments that don't have due dates, they can be subject to requests for extensions. We don't have accommodations that let students get 50% more time on their homework assignments or anything outside of the class itself, because the syllabus already has all their due dates. So they know how to time themselves ahead of time, and they know if they're going to have to, if it's going to take them 50% more time to do a paper, then they need to start quicker. They need to plan ahead. But if a date isn't assigned until the week of, then that it's due, they very well may be able to ask for a time extension on that for a variety of reasons. But as we explain to our students, the test dates and assignment due dates in your syllabus is an accommodation. It's there for a reason. That way you have to prepare for that, and prepare for how much time it's going to take you to complete each one. So if they're asking you for outside extensions of homework and things like that, that's what I'm saying is they're not eligible for that, unless it's something you would do for any student that you felt like needed it. But you need to be careful with that. And just a couple of compliance tips. When a student meets with you, just be careful that you don't ask them what their disability is. Only talk about the assistance that they need from you and from that accommodation letter. Some of our students will want to sit and talk with you about it all day long, and they will very openly share with you what their area of disability is, and that's fine. Just be careful that you're not asking them that kind of question when they're visiting with you. And then again, don't provide requested accommodations that are not on the LOA unless you're willing to do it for any student. I say this because we've had students in the past that when they were presenting letters of accommodation to their instructor, they provided them with a supplemental list of accommodations that they felt like they needed as well on their LOA. That's why I'm saying, unless it comes to you through your electronic email, please don't accept it, because we do have students who have in the past felt like that they needed to supplement what we were sending you as an instructor that they needed. So that is really the main points I wanted to cover today. Just the process of what happens when you get that accommodation letter, what you do, how you set it up, what needs to be in it, what doesn't need to be in it, and then how we can help you with that process. So Suzanne, I'm going to open it up now to any questions. Let's just do individual questions if anybody has them, or just questions or comments, either one.
Hey, Larry, may I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
So for the pink form, the students should fill in the pink form, sign and date it, and then just give it to me. And then I fill in the information for the instruction, right?
Yes, yes. And then that student will return that pink form to the testing center.
So I should just, after everything, I should give it to the students, right?
Yes, yes. You fill in your information, which will explain how you want that exam. It's going to explain, one, how you're going to get the test to the testing center, and then what method you want to have it returned to you, either by email or campus mail, or if you're going to come pick it up. So you have the option of doing that. But yes, the student will bring that to you. They will fill it out together, and then the student will return it back to the academic testing center.
Okay, so if the students already gave me the pink form, but she didn't check which accommodation she wants, so does it matter for me? Because I don't know specific what accommodations she wants.
I'm sorry, can you ask that question one more time?
So on the pink form,
yes.
One of my students, she gave me the pink form, but on the accommodation requested, she didn't choose which one she wants.
Okay. Yeah, so that's what y'all will talk about, because the accommodation should be, I get my extra time, or because it's going to be a reduced distraction and testing environment, or the extra time on the exam. And so that's what would be filled in there. But that will be up to them to write down. So you need to have the student write out, which accommodations do you want? Extra time, or is it just the reduced distraction environment?
Sure.
Yeah, and they will fill that in.
Okay, another question I have is on the pink form, it said testing must take place during our office hours, Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. But you also mentioned that the exam can be taken in the evenings, right?
The only time that it can be, but the exam should be taken at the same time as the class is taking theirs. The only
Okay,
time that there would be a change in that is if the time that the test is scheduled, if they use their extra time, if that caused it to run into another class, that's when we could move the testing time either up in time so they could start early or change it to a different time. We're trying to be really careful not to move the time around. That's why we now have testing in the evening. Because it used to be when the academic testing center wasn't open in the evening, those students would take their exam sometime during the day. Well, we do the proctoring now for evening exams over in the SDS office. So they should still be taking their exams at the same time everyone else is. So,
sure. Okay, thank
right.
you.
Right. And if you have any questions about when an exam might be needed or moved around, that's something that you can definitely call the SDS counselor and talk about. They will help you with that, work out a schedule for that. So,
Okay, maybe a third question is how to reserve a seat for students. Like if some students sit there, should we just say, could you just take another seat, something like that?
they've done it in different ways. That doesn't happen too often, but and priority seating should be on the student's letter of accommodation. So if priority seating is not on their letter of accommodation, that's nothing you're required to do. But if it is, you can reserve a seat. Most of them just put a piece of paper
Sure.
on the sheet that just says reserved for, or just reserved. And again, if that student wants it and they're going to sit there, then they know the people will know, and but there's not really anything you can do about that.
Okay, thank you so much.
No. Okay. What were the other questions? I'm sorry, Suzanne, you kind of have to help me. These are popping up, and I'm
Maybe the question about time and a half in class work.
in class work.
Yes.
Right. And that's going to apply only to assignments that you give them at the very beginning of the class. It has to be turned in before class is over. That's what that applies for. They could get extra time. Now, if you're not able to provide that, in other words, if there's another class coming in right after your class, then what we would work with you on is there a way they could go either finish in your office? Is there an area somewhere around that area where they could go back and spend a little bit more time? So that's going to kind of be one of those individual cases. We don't see that a whole lot because there's not a lot of cases where there's something assigned that has to be done during class right then and turned in before they leave. But that would kind of be on a case-by-case basis. Okay, let me go down here real quick. Just to clarify, since my office hours say by appointment, I can meet with a student with a disability to provide extra help if they ask. Yes, that is correct. Yes, you can also decline the request if the timing doesn't work. Or if they're asking repeatedly, as I would decline it for another student. Yes. And most instructors have office hours, and you can tell them to try to come by during your regular office hours. And then if they can't, then you could set up something like just through email or a virtual meeting. But the appointment should be just during your regularly scheduled office hours. By appointment only, you're right, that could open up a lot of problems there. But what about questions I asked during class that are graded for participation only? Can you kind of clarify for me what you mean by that? I'm not quite sure what that.
Yeah, sure. That was in follow-up to the question about in-class time.
Right.
I ask a lot of, questions, and I give them 3 or 4 minutes to work on something, right? And then we move on to the next one. They do submit answers via Top Hat, but it's only for participation. I'm not grading them for correctness. So as long as they submit anything, they get
sure.
And so I had I emailed a student who emailed me about accommodations, and I kind of explained, like, you can just go ahead and submit anything during that time. You'll get full credit for it. If you need more time to work through the problem fully later, of course you can do that on your own. You can email me if you have any problems with it. So I guess I just want to make sure that there's nothing else different that I need to do during
No.
class, because they can earn the full points even if they feel like they haven't, I don't know, gotten all the way through working through the problem.
Sure. And Lisa, I think one thing to keep in mind there is the in-class work also kind of applies to the same thing as the exams do, and that's timed stuff. So if they came in and your class starts at 8 and you gave them an assignment that had to be completed by 9, that's what we're talking about, not just general participation, like, things like you're talking about. Yeah. Because that's not always going to be applicable and reasonable for that matter. But really what that's talking about is if there's something that's timed that has to be completed in that class before they leave, is really what that's talking about.
Thanks.
Sure. Others, and did I miss any? I'm trying to follow that chat box.
I think you're caught up right now.
Okay, all right. Were there others? I don't want to take your time up, but I think the main thing is just please feel free at any point, if you have a question or concern about an accommodation, how it's to be provided, or if you feel like there's a student that's really struggling or causing an issue with you, or maybe not using things the way they're supposed to be, please reach out to us. That's what we're here for. Yes, we're here to support our students with disabilities, but we are just as much here for you as a faculty resource to help with that as well. So please feel free to do that at any point. So